Imagine finding out your entire life was essentially a footnote in someone else's highlight reel, only to realize the people writing the script were your own parents. How would you feel if you were told to your face that your future didn't matter because your sister's comfort was a higher priority? That's exactly what happened to me, and honestly, I'm still reeling from the fallout. I want you to listen to this and tell me straight. Was I being a spiteful, ungrateful brat for how I handled this, or did they get exactly what they deserved for trying to trade my life for a guest bedroom? I grew up in what I thought was a normal, albeit slightly leaning towards my sister household. My sister, Clara, is 2 years older than me and has always been the delicate one. You know the type, the one who gets a slight cold and the whole house goes into lockdown. The one whose hobbies are treated like Olympic training while mine were treated like chores. When Clara decided she wanted to go to an expensive private university across the country, my parents, Mark and Sarah, didn't even blink. They took out second mortgages, worked overtime, and made sure she had everything she needed. Meanwhile, I was a student, working 20 hours a week at a local diner since I was 16, saving every penny because I knew, deep down, the college fund they talked about was probably already spent on Clara's sorority dues and spring break trips. I never complained. I figured, hey, that's just how it is. I'm the resilient one. I'm the one who can handle the pressure. But then came the house. About 3 years ago, my maternal grandfather passed away. It was a huge blow to the family, but he left behind a massive, beautiful old Victorian house in a town that was quickly becoming a tech hub. Property values were skyrocketing. In his will, he left the house to my mother. It was supposed to be our family legacy. At the time, I was finishing up my sophomore year at a state school I was paying for myself, and I was living in a cramped, moldy studio apartment. My parents told me to hang in there. They said that once they sold their current house and moved into Grandpa's place, there would be plenty of room for everyone. They promised me that the entire finished basement, which was basically a self-contained apartment, would be mine so I could save on rent, finish my degree, and finally have a bit of breathing room. I was ecstatic. For the first time, I felt like I was being prioritized. Fast forward to last month. The move was finally happening. I had spent my entire spring break helping them pack, cleaning out the old house, and literally doing the heavy lifting because my dad has a bad back and Clara can't handle the dust. Because of her allergies, I didn't mind. I was looking forward to that basement. I had already planned where my desk would go, how I'd set up my books, and the sheer relief of not having to worry about $200 rent payment every month. 2 weeks before the official move-in date, my mom called me for a family meeting over dinner. I walked in, and the atmosphere was thick. You could cut the tension with a knife. Clara was sitting there, looking down at her phone, smirking slightly. My dad wouldn't look me in the eye. My mom started by saying how much they appreciate everything I do. That's always the red flag, isn't it? When the praise starts piling up, the shovel is usually right behind it. She told me that they had been looking at the finances for the move, the taxes on the new place, the renovations, the cost of the moving company. Then she dropped the bomb. She said, "Honey, we've realized we just can't afford 2 tickets for the professional movers and the extra insurance for your belongings. And more importantly, Clara has decided she's moving back home to pursue her influencer career and needs a dedicated studio space. We've decided she's going to take the basement apartment." I sat there, stunned. I asked where that left me. My mom had the audacity to suggest I stay in my moldy studio or find a roommate. She said, "You're so independent and strong, You'll figure it out. Clara needs the support right now." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at them and asked, "So the plan we've had for 2 years, the one I've been working toward, is just gone because Clara wants to film TikToks in a basement I was promised?" My dad finally spoke up and said, "It's not like that. It's just logistics. We can only afford to move one of you properly, and since Clara has more delicate equipment and needs the space for her career, it just makes sense. You can still come over for Sunday dinner." That was the moment something inside me just snapped. They weren't just choosing her. They were actively discarding me because they knew I wouldn't make a scene. They banked on my strength as a way to avoid their own guilt. I went home that night and didn't sleep. I realized that for years I had been the one providing the moving truck for their lives. I was the one who helped, who sacrificed, who stayed quiet. And now they were literally telling me they couldn't afford to move me into a house that was partially my heritage too. So I started looking into things. I remembered Grandpa's will. My mom inherited the house, yes, but Grandpa was a smart man. He knew my mom was flighty with money and that Clara was, well, Clara. I dug through the digital copies of the estate papers my uncle had sent me a year ago. And there it was, a clause, a very specific, very beautiful clause. Grandpa had stipulated that while my mother held the title, the auxiliary living space, the basement apartment, was to be maintained as a residence for his grandchildren until they reached the age of 25 or until the house was sold. If the space was to be used for any other purpose, or if a grandchild was unreasonably denied residence, a portion of the estate's remaining cash trust, which my mother was using to pay for the renovations, would be frozen and diverted into a high-yield savings account for the displaced grandchild. Before I tell you what I did with that information and how I turned their moving day into a total nightmare, I want you to stop. Look at the situation. I was promised a home, I worked for it, and it was snatched away for a studio for a sister who has never worked a day in her life. My parents lied to me and used my resilience against me. What would you do? Would you just walk away and be the bigger person? Or would you fight for what was promised? Let me know in the comments right now, because what I did next changed my family forever. I didn't tell them I found the clause. Instead, I waited. I waited until the day before the big move. My parents had already sold their old house. The new owners were taking possession the next day. All their stuff was packed in boxes. Clara's delicate equipment was all wrapped in bubble wrap. I called my mom and asked one last time, "Are you sure there's no room for me? I can't afford my rent next month because I spent my savings helping you guys with the cleaning and prep for the new place." My mom sighed that patronizing, "Oh, you poor thing," sigh and said, "Sweetie, we've been over this. We just can't afford the logistics of moving you right now. Maybe next year." "Okay." I said, "I understand perfectly." I didn't go to help them move the next morning. I didn't show up to drive the second truck they'd rented for the overflow. Instead, I went to the estate lawyer's office. I presented the evidence that I was being denied my residence as per the trust. The lawyer, who actually liked my grandfather and knew my parents were a bit much, filed the injunction immediately. By noon, the trust account, the one paying for the movers, the one paying for the contractors waiting at the new house, and the one my mom was using to cover the closing costs on the old house's repairs, was frozen solid. Around 2:00 p.m., my phone started exploding. It was my mom. She was hysterical. The movers were refusing to unload the truck at the new house because the credit card linked to the trust was declined. The contractors had walked off the job because their deposit check had bounced. They were sitting in a hot driveway with 3 trucks full of furniture and nowhere to put it because they couldn't pay the final balance. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. Then my dad called. He was angry. "What did you do? The lawyer says you filed a claim. Are you insane? We're sitting on the curb." I finally picked up. I said, "Well, Dad, you said you couldn't afford the logistics of moving me. I guess I just decided that if I'm not moving in, nobody is moving in on Grandpa's dime. Since you're denying me the residence he legally set aside for me, that money is now mine. Or at least, it's sitting in an account you can't touch until a judge decides. Hope you have a backup plan for the night." The fallout was spectacular. They had to pay for the movers out of their own meager savings, which meant they couldn't afford the luxury renovations Clara wanted for her studio. Because the trust was frozen, they couldn't pay the contractors, who then sued for breach of contract. But the best part, to get the money unfrozen, my mom had to legally sign a document acknowledging my right to live in that basement, rent-free, for the next 3 years. When they finally moved in, 3 days late and thousands of dollars poorer, I was already there. I had hired my own moving truck paid for by a small advancement from the trust the lawyer secured for me, and I had changed the locks on the basement door. When Clara showed up with her ring lights and her vanity, she found me sitting on my sofa, drinking a soda. She started screaming that I was ruining her life. My mom was crying, saying I had betrayed the family. I just looked at them and said, "You told me you couldn't afford 2 tickets. I just bought my own, and it looks like the moving truck stopped here." They tried to make my life miserable for the first few weeks, but I have a legal right to be there. I don't speak to them. I have a separate entrance. Clara is stuck in her old bedroom upstairs, which is half the size of the basement, and she's constantly complaining that the lighting is terrible for her brand. My parents are working extra shifts to pay off the debts they incurred from the move-day disaster. They keep telling relatives that I'm a cold-hearted monster who sued her own mother, but whenever anyone hears the full story about the promise, the work I put in, and the legal clause, they usually go quiet. I'm finishing my degree this year. I'm saving every cent I would have spent on rent, and honestly, the silence from the rest of the house is the best part. I learned that being the strong one doesn't mean you have to be a doormat. It means you have the strength to stand up when the people who are supposed to love you try to walk all over you. I took the moving truck they wouldn't give me and drove it right through their plans. Looking back, I don't regret a single thing. Sometimes family needs a wake-up call that resilience isn't a license for them to be selfish. I showed them that I'm not just a supporting character in Clara's life, I'm the lead in mine. If they wanted a peaceful move, they should have honored their word. It's a hard lesson to learn, but I think they've finally realized that my independence is a lot more powerful than they anticipated. Was I the villain for freezing the money and forcing my way in? Or was I just finally taking the seat at the table? Or in this case, the apartment in the basement, that was already mine? Like this video if you think I did the right thing and that parents shouldn't play favorites with their kids' futures. Subscribe for more stories about people finally getting their revenge on entitled family members. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. I'll be reading them from my very comfortable, very free basement apartment. I'll see you all in the next story.